in the backyard were the best games in town where we grew up. At that time, I was a little too young to play, and that used to make me mad because I thought I was good enough. But we'd always pick up a kid in the neighborhood, and the games never ended because we'd always get into fights. And then my father would come out with a shovel or a rake or a baseball bat or something, and he'd break it up, and everybody would scatter. And I can still recall whoever the extra kid was, either a neighbor or one of our friends, they'd always say, "Mr. T, you can't hit me. I'm not your son." He says, "That's not true. As long as you're on my property, you're one of my kids." And he'd hit him too. So that's how it worked in the Tripucka family.
And you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
We're all getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you made the pass, yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 73. Thanks for joining me. Today, I'm excited to welcome Kelly Tripucka to the show. This is the first of a two-part release, only the second time in the podcast's history that a guest episode has become a two-parter. The other, great friend of the show, Jim McIlvaine, and that was in episodes 39 and 40. A huge thanks to Chris, who is Kelly's brother, who very kindly helped me connect with Kelly and therefore made this chat possible. Our conversation was recorded over 2 days, almost 3 weeks apart. For context, which will make perfect sense when you listen, I've added brief radio static sounds that let you know the chat is switching from the first to the second recording, and this allowed me to edit the conversation together into a chronological order. Part 1 of our chat covers the unique sporting history of the Tripucka family. You'll learn just how talented Kelly and his siblings are, plus we briefly cover the career of Frank Tripucka, Kelly's father, and the recent re-retiring of his famous number 18 for the Denver Broncos, a number that NFL superstar Peyton Manning had on loan during the final seasons of his stellar career. We then dive into the wonderful history of Kelly's early sporting life, his memories of playing many high school sports, his decision to attend the University of Notre Dame, the 1981 NBA draft, and his fascinating first 2 NBA seasons with the Detroit Pistons. As a rookie, he was named an NBA All-Star and went on to make the All-Rookie team. In his second season, he was 3rd in the NBA in points per game, behind only Alex English and Kiki VanDeWeghe. Kelly exploded for a 56-point performance against the Chicago Bulls in his second season, breaking then record holder the legendary Dave Bing for the franchise's single game scoring high. Those are just some of the many topics covered in part 1. Stay up to date with my podcast and subscribe to my monthly email newsletter. You'll receive exclusive details on upcoming podcast episodes, future high-profile guests to appear on the show, and much more. Simply visit inallairness.com/news. Show notes for this episode, including links to numerous topics covered, are at inallairness.com/73. Towards the end of the episode, I'll also share another great podcast review. You can add yours by visiting inallairness.com/review. Now, onto the show. My guest today was a third-team All-American at Notre Dame. He was a first-round NBA draft pick and an All-Star in his rookie year. He played 10 seasons in the NBA, and his family's background in sports is nothing short of prolific. Kelly Tripucka, thanks for joining me.
Adam, pleasure to be with you.
It's awesome to have a chance to chat with you today. And first up, I want to thank your brother, Chris, because he helped us actually connect today. So it was great of him to actually help us do that. So thanks to him. Speaking of family, researching for our chat today, I've learnt that you're one of 7 children. And I quickly realised that the Tripucka name is absolutely stacked with talent when it comes to sport. Your father, Frank, played quarterback at Notre Dame and then went on to have a great pro career in the NFL and a few other leagues. And then there's your brothers, who are great players in their own right. And then, not to be outdone, a newspaper article that I read about your sister, Heather. Apparently she dropped 56 points, might have even been a bit more than that, in a high school intramural game. So I can't begin to imagine some of the backyard battles you must have had. Do you mind just elaborating on that incredible history within your own family?
Well, Adam, first of all, thanks. Sports has meant so much to all our family. We grew up on sports. It's been very good to us. It's been better to some rather than others, but it started with my father. As you mentioned, he played at Notre Dame and played 15 years of professional football between the NFL, the Canadian League, and then he started in the AFL. In fact, was the first quarterback of the Denver Broncos back in 1960, threw the first touchdown pass in AFL history.
Wow.
So that's something they can never take away from you. Only one of 3 Broncos to ever have their number retired, along with John Elway and Floyd Little. And, of course, I'm sure people have read about that Peyton Manning wore my father's number before my dad passed about 3 years ago. Peyton called because 18 was his number throughout his pro career, and he wondered whether my father would allow him to wear it. My father gave him his blessing. I don't want to give you a long, drawn-out story, but they had contact. My father had some dementia and was in kind of failing health, but he knew about, obviously, Peyton Manning, the Manning family, and all the success they've had, and he had no problem with Peyton wearing his number. Peyton says, I understand that retired numbers are sacred and they shouldn't be touched, but my father, without a doubt, didn't hesitate to say, no, you go ahead and wear it and enjoy it. It was just kind of like on a borrowed basis because it was retired, but he gave his blessings, and one of the last things my father said to Peyton Manning was, wear it in good health and go out and win a Super Bowl. And guess what? They won a Super Bowl last year. In fact, the whole family is going out to Denver, Adam, in a couple of weeks because they're going to re-retire the 3 numbers. So John Elway's, Floyd Little, and my father's, and they're going to put a little mention of Peyton wearing his number. Peyton's going to be there, and we're going to raise the numbers to the rafters at Mile High Stadium. So, but back to where, sports had been so good. My dad, everybody knew my father and his background, and he never pushed sports onto us. It was something we, elected to do. He just basically wanted us to stay busy and stay out of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
He never gave us, everything we wanted. He gave us what we needed. I give a lot of credit to my older brother, Tracy, who played, was an All-American at Lafayette College and was drafted by the New York Knicks. Ended up, back when they had the great teams with Walt Frazier and DeBusschere and Bradley and Willis Reed and those guys. He was one of the last cuts twice by the Knicks and ended up going to play overseas in Switzerland. But I think you kind of follow who's ahead of you. He had a twin sister. Heather was way before her time because she's about 6 feet tall. Didn't really have women's sports back in that day.
Right.
So she played intramural and she was pretty good. But then I think it was just a matter of all the brothers following one another. I had a brother, Mark, after Tracy, who was a quarterback at the University of Massachusetts. Then my next brother, Todd, also went to Lafayette and played basketball. He was a real good football player, but wanted to play basketball in college and really was a self-made basketball player. My brother had a little help in getting him into college, and he was at one time the 5th leading scorer one year at Lafayette in the NCAAs. And then my next brother, TK, who's 2 years older than me, was a basketball player at 6'9", went to Fordham University.
Mm-hmm.
And then myself, and I had a younger brother, Chris, who you mentioned earlier, and he played football up at Boston College. So, we kind of followed one another. My parents, God bless them, they must have saw more games than anybody humanly possible, trying to get to college games and then high school games, and they saw 3 or 4 games a week. And you got to remember, we all played different sports as well. It wasn't just one sport. It was always emphasized to play different sports because you learn different things that help you in different sports. And, you have different teammates. Sometimes you have the same teammates. So, my father always said, if you're going to do something, do it right. We used to practice and, pickup games and things like that. As you mentioned a little bit before, were in the backyard were the best games in town where we grew up. At that time, I was a little too young to play. And that used to make me mad because I thought I was good enough. But we'd always pick up a kid in the neighborhood, and the games never ended because we'd always get into fights. And then my father would come out with a shovel or a rake or a baseball bat or something, and he'd break it up, and everybody would scatter. And I can still recall whoever the extra kid was, either a neighbor or one of our friends, they'd always say, Mr. T, you can't hit me. I'm not your son. He says, that's not true. As long as you're on my property, you're one of my kids. And he'd hit him too. So that's how it worked in the Tripucka family. It was a great place to grow up. We grew up in Bloomfield, New Jersey. And the biggest thing we ever did, we had a great high school tradition for basketball. And we had a guy that named George Cella, Cella, and he was legendary in the state of New Jersey. Won over 500 games. He was like the John Wooden of high school where we were. And the goal for all of us was to play for our high school team and to play for George Cella. And that was one of my fondest memories because I used to go see my older brothers play, and I saw them all play all through their high school careers until it was, my turn. And as a kid, I never thought about anything other than if I made it, it was being a member of the Bloomfield Bengals and playing for George Cella. So I still have great memories of that and was fortunate to have a great career. But, sports has been tremendous for all of us, whether it was Pop Warner football or basketball. A lot of brothers played football. I played a little soccer. A few of us played track and field. So we were always busy. I don't know where we'd be without sports, Adam. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of the Tripucka family. Sports has been everything to us. My mother would say we got all our athletic ability from her, which is kind of a joke, haha. But I tell you what, my parents were our biggest fans, and they made sure they came to all the games that their kids played. So it says a lot about them as well.
It sure does. And yeah, it just sounds like an incredible background growing up surrounded by all that and having such a tight-knit family unit as well. I read that you spent a few summers playing with your brothers in the Jersey City Collegiate League. You could almost field a starting lineup yourself just with Tripuckas by the sounds of things. How was your memory of some of those games that you actually played alongside your brothers?
Maybe the most fond memories I have. I don't want to make a drastic comparison, but that's right up there with playing in the NBA. These leagues that were started at that time. Bob Hurley, the great high school basketball coach, was responsible for that when I was in college. And he had an outdoor league where he bought actual indoor baskets outside the Pershing Field in Jersey City. So you had glass backboards. And at that time, that was unheard of. That was something new. So he actually, the indoor baskets that you see in the arenas, he had them come outside, and we had under lights and played over in Jersey City. My father sponsored the team, his beer distributorship. So we were Trip distributors.
Oh, nice.
Trip is short for Tripucka. That's what he had a Miller beer distributor for 25, 30 years in Paterson that covered the three largest counties in New Jersey, Bergen, Hudson, and Passaic County. He was our sponsor, and he had great talent, guys locally from New Jersey and New York that came over and played. Boy, that was just a lot of fun. We had a great team. We won it all, and of course we celebrated with some kind of Miller beer or whatever. And that turned into going down once I graduated from college. Went down and played in the Jersey Shore League, which was a big thing around here. I did that for 12 or 13 years in the summers between every off season.
Oh, okay, wow.
Unfortunately, that catches up to you, and I think that's why I'm paying the price now with my knees playing outside. You would never get these guys to go play outside, but these games were all outside on the macadam, blacktop, and when you're young, you're invincible. So I'm sure too many games outside has maybe caught up to me, but I loved playing summer basketball. I mean, that's where you learned how to play, and whether it was just pickup games in Bloomfield at a place called Brookside Park, which my brothers, maybe 2 miles down the road on the main street that we lived on. You'd go down there in spring and summer from May to August, 4 or 5 nights a week. You have 50 guys down there.
Wow.
And some great talent, and you better win because, if you lost, it took you a while to get back into a game because there were so many guys in line. So unless they were a guy short, winner stays on and next group goes on. We went down there, and I was actually one of the afterthoughts early on because my brothers would go down there and they would tell me I was too young. And then that's kind of where I made my mark when I was about in 8th or 9th grade. They finally took me along, and I was playing against, nobody knows how old you are or whatever. There's mostly college guys and people like that. I was playing against guys that were 5, 6, 7 years older than me. And I think my brother started to notice that, hey, Kel's pretty good. He's kicking that guy's butt, and this guy's in college. I'm in 9th grade or whatever. So now they wanted to take me every day to play. And that's kind of where we honed our skills. And obviously, once you go up into high school, I played in a summer league down in East Orange. That was great talent. And that was kind of by accident because I remember my father was head of the Fifth Quarter Club here in Bloomfield. That was like the booster club for the high school. And he used to host a picnic at our house every summer for all the boosters, 100 some odd people or whatever. And I remember one summer I was like in 8th or 9th grade because all of a sudden this little black gentleman came walking up the driveway and he looked at a place. Somebody asked him, "Can I help you?" And he said, "I'm looking for TK, who was my next oldest brother. I played in high school. TK's 2 years older than me." And he started talking to him, and I was curious of what he said. What was that all about? And he says, "Oh, this guy says they're running a summer league over in East Orange." He says, "Wow, yeah." He asked me if I wanted to play, and it sounded pretty good. So he said, "I'm going to go over." Of course, now he's going over, and I'm jealous because I want to play, So I couldn't wait for him to go over there and see how it was and play. And then sitting up, couldn't wait for him to come home after the first game. I said, "How was it? How was it?" He goes, "It was really good. It was packed, a lot of people outside, great court." He said, "But we stink, our team." So he said, "The good thing is," he says, "if I know anybody, I can bring them the next game. Do you want to go?" And I was like a kid in a candy store. I was excited because you're always looking to get better and you want to, you play against, good people. And I was, still young. I was like, only in 9th grade or whatever. So I'm not even in high school yet. So sure enough, I went over there and we drive up and the place is packed. We're kind of the only white people in the park, but that doesn't matter, But they were excited, and it was, and I was like, "Oh wow!" I was like, just eyes wide open, going, "This is crazy." TK was in high school, so he knew a lot of these guys from playing against him in high school, whether it was Orange, East Orange, the local county that we live in, and a lot of the teams that we play. So he knew some of these guys, and I knew who they were because I, go to watch the games. So I knew a lot of these guys, but they were just older than me. Sure enough, we warm up, and this is like the biggest thing in my life right now. So we warm up, and sure enough, we start after the game starts. He doesn't know who the coach, guy named Mike McNair, little tiny guy, about 5'5". He was the one that came to the picnic. He was just coaching, and so we're watching the game. We're like losing by 20 or whatever, and it's not going good. And he's getting frustrated and just looking to do something. And all of a sudden, like in the second half, he just turns to me and says, "Why don't you go in and see what you can do?" He doesn't know me from a hole in the wall. Neither does anybody else, other than I'm TK's brother. I go in, and make a long story short, I end up helping us, bringing us back. I have like 20 points, and we come back and win the game. And this little guy, Mike McNair, our coach, was running around like Jimmy Valvano did when they won the national championship for North Carolina State, looking for somebody to hug. And he's going over to everybody. And finally, he comes up to TK, and he grabs TK after the thing and grabs him by the shirt with 2 fists, and he shakes him, and he goes, "You got any more brothers at home?" So, well, from that point on, Adam, I was like big you-know-what in East Orange. The next game, I got kids that are saving, for TK and I, saving us a parking spot. They see us coming down the street to the park, and they got a spot right in the corner reserved for our car, and they're telling everybody, "The white boy's here, the white boy's here." And from that point on, that's kind of like we were big things. And, of course, they knew me later on once I started playing high school. And, summer league basketball, that's my point. Summer league basketball was just the greatest thing from East Orange over to Jersey City, down to the Jersey Shore League, nights at Brookside. I mean, that's where you made your mark. And I tell you what, you could make an argument that was as fun as anything you did in college and in the NBA. It was really that special. A lot of fun.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing these sort of memories, and it shows how it just further develops your desire to want to play the game and just become a better and better player. And this is only as before you've even entered high school and get into your college years.
That's how you get better. There's no question about it. You have to play. You can be big fish in your team or on your block or whatever, or even in town. But once you get to that point, my thought was always, well, okay, I'm good against these guys. Now, let's see how good I am against the guys in the next town or the next county over or whatever. You're always looking for the next big thing because you got to compare yourself. That's the problem. Everybody thinks, oh, yeah, I'm good, because I'm beating, kids I play against all the time who aren't very good. You got to go find the competition, And by the way, the name of that park down in East Orange was Elmwood Park. So, from Elmwood Park to Pershing Field to the headliner down in the Jersey Shore, these are all the places. We used to go find places to play, And even when we weren't playing the leagues, if we were just playing at Brookside, if you heard about a place that was pretty good pickup games, you'd go over there because you just wanted to see better guys, and compare yourself. That's what made me who I became, was the competition and trying to compete against guys that were good. I wanted to find out who were the other good guys, where were they playing, and compete against them. And I think that was great preparation, not only high school for me, but for college and for the pros. There's no question about it. The pickup basketball, summertime basketball, summer league basketball, that was as important as anything I ever did in playing. And I had as much fun as I've ever playing basketball in those leagues.
That's awesome to hear. So you said that you played during the summers for well over 10 years. So you're talking about going throughout most of your pro career as well. You'd still play in summer leagues? Every summer.
Wow. Now they probably restricted. They don't allow you. They didn't want you to. But, what are you going to do? Just working out. You have to play. Even when you're a pro, you got to get better. You can't just shoot around. You got to stay in shape and play. Unfortunately for us, it was playing outside most of the time. But you never thought about it. You didn't think about, getting hurt or, later on, what it's going to do to your body or whatever. You just wanted to compete. It was fun. You played. I mean, it was like 100 degrees, and you're, hot and humid in New Jersey down the summer league, and go down to the headliner where we played Jersey Shore League for a good 12, 13 years. There are nights there where the breeze was blowing. You had to play the breeze. I mean, you'd shoot free throws and you'd aim a foot over to the left because you knew the ball was going to blow back to the middle. And it took a special skill how to do that. We used to have tin backboards down there, too. This wasn't like Pershing Field where you had regular glass backboards. You had tin backboards. So it was an art to shoot a bank shot. Nobody shoots a bank shot now. Tim Duncan was like the last one to shoot, to use the backboard. Down there, I could shoot that ball and I could hit that backboard and it would just die off the backboard into the thing. I knew every angle to shoot bank shots. You had to know, as well as the wind. You had to play the wind. There's some days it was really breezy, and if you put up a bad shot, it would blow off course by 3 feet. But it was an art form, to tell you that. But those games, I mean, we'd have a couple hundred people at those games. And the bar was right next door, and it was, free drinks after. So, that was all good.
Sounds like there's some great memories there and some great times were had on the court and off. And also, thanks for sharing that information about the Manning family too. That's a great achievement as well, to have that number re-retired again in a future ceremony not too far away. So, yeah, really interesting stuff. And it was good to see that Peyton was willing to actually even call and speak to your father to ask if it was okay to wear that number.
Yeah, I actually saw him, Adam. I knew about him asking my father. And then when my dad passed, they actually were in town a couple of years ago to play the Giants. He reiterated the story and how much he appreciated my father saying yes to him. He says he didn't really want to make that call because he felt in his own mind that I shouldn't be doing this because, again, numbers that are retired are sacred. You shouldn't mess with them. But somebody convinced him, or he had heard some rumor that my father would be willing to do that, my mother and father. And my mother and father had so much respect for the Manning family and the success that they've had that, my mom kind of spoke for my dad in some ways. And he was more than willing to do that. My father never looked at the number as, something that nobody could have. He just kind of looked at it as it's a number, but when you look at who was asking, I mean, how do you say no to Peyton Manning with the career that he's had and his family background, maybe in similar ways, a smaller version of the Tripucka family. I mean, they're so classy and he was so classy and he handled it so well. And I meeting him and talking to him or whatever, I think he was scared. In fact, he kind of told the story where talking to my dad, where I just told you about my father and, once you're on the property, you're one of his.
Yep.
He kind of told the story where I felt like if I didn't say yes, I'll do it, that he was going to come to the phone and maybe deck him as well. So so that's how Peyton Manning saw it. So we're looking forward to going out and seeing him and him being part of this number retirement and raising the number, because according to the Broncos, they're going to put my father's name, real big on the top like a normal number. They're just going to have a little mention on the bottom, obviously, because Peyton Manning's 4 years with the Broncos and going to the Super Bowl twice and then finally winning the last. But they just want to make sure that everybody knows that this is Frank Tripucka's number and it was just borrowed by Peyton Manning. So I think they'll handle it well. And, again, watching Peyton Manning and what he's done, I don't think my father had any second thoughts about not even doing this for Peyton Manning. So it's worked out well. It's just kind of ironic that what my dad said to him and then they end up winning. And so we're looking forward to the whole process in a couple of weeks out in Denver.
That's fantastic. It's a touching story too. Only in the last week or so, your family travelled to Denver as the Broncos unveiled retired number banners, and one of which honours your father, who was the franchise's first quarterback who wore number 18. How was the pre-game ceremony, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, was attended by an equal number 18 family members? Is that correct?
Yeah, that just happened to work out that way, Adam. They did a great job. It was a lot of fun. It was great for my dad. And, the Broncos only had 3 numbers retired in the franchise history since 1960. So I figure that's 56 years now. And only 3 numbers ever been retired. My father's was the first after he finished playing in the 64 season. And then a few years later on in the 70s, Floyd Little, who was number 44. Of course, John Elway was great and won a couple of Super Bowls with the Denver Broncos. So, and then before Peyton Manning asked to borrow my father's number, he got a special mention at the bottom of my father's jersey. So, there were representatives of all 3. John Elway was there and a couple of his daughters and a grandson and Floyd Little and his wife. And then there ended up being 18 Tripuckas out there. So that was kind of just coincidental. And game happened to be on the 18th of September. So number 18 on the 18th with 18 people. So somehow it was meant to be, Adam. But, they did a nice job. It was nice because we don't get together very, very often. I had a younger brother come from Texas and most of us coming from New Jersey, but still you don't see the immediate family, the 7 kids get together very often. So we were all out there. They all made it. A lot of nieces and nephews and one great-grandchild of my mother and father was there as well. So we went out there for a couple of days, flew out on Saturday and beautiful weather. Some walked around the town and others relaxed because it was such an early morning, watched some college football, and then went to dinner on Saturday night. And then Sunday we got prepared for the game, and they drove us over to the stadium. We got to walk around and visit the monuments that they have there for all the players that were inducted to the Ring of Fame. There's about, I'm going to say about 18 to 20 players. So they have these 6-foot tall, I guess you would call them statues, but they're not really statues. They're like wooden beams. And they have the 3D faces of the former players, obviously, including my father's. They have a special area there that you can walk up and stand next to the statues. And so we took some pictures there, and it's right in the front of the stadium. So we hadn't seen that. So we took a lot of pictures there and walked around the stadium, saw all the people tailgating and things like that. And then we finally went in and met the personnel from the Broncos. They took us in the stadium, and we stood on the field for a while watching warm-ups and preparing for the ceremony, which was done before the game. And it was very well done. Once, got close to game time, they put us out 3 sections, the Tripuckas and then the Littles and then the Elways right in the end zone. They introduced and showed little highlights of each player and what they meant to the franchise. And then one by one up in the top corner of one of the end zone, they had these I don't know what you would call it, but they put the numbers. They're banners, but they were on, backing. So, these are like 10 foot high, and they were covered in black. And then one by one, they took them down for each, as they introduced each individual player. And it was obviously number 18 and number 44 and then number 7. Did the national anthem. They had to fly over. That was cool. And then we went up into a box and we watched the game. It was a great game. They beat the Colts, and we walked around after the game and went into the Broncos store, where you can buy T-shirts and things like that, and met some people, and people come up and talk to you and want to know who you are and whatever. So that was fun, and then we flew home on Monday. So it was a very well done ceremony. We had a lot of fun. We were glad we went, and it worked out great, and the weather was beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to say the couple of great photos that your brother Chris shared that have turned up on a few websites, and I'll include those photos in the show notes of this episode as well. There's one where you've got the 7 children in the family, as you mentioned, standing next to the the statue or the bust or whatever you might call it.
Yeah, that was good, right.
Fantastic. And then there's a great photo of you guys right near the actual field itself with the crowd in the background. It looked like a stunning day, so great memories. So I'll share those in the show notes.
Yeah, one of the photos we took was with Jim Nance, who's a good friend of mine. He actually called the game for CBS.
Oh, nice.
Jim Nance and I were neighbors in Utah when I played, by accident, kind of. And, it's funny because we're the same age. So Jim and I have known each other for 30 years. He and his wife at that time. We kind of met by accident. His condo and my condo were literally 10, 20 feet away.
All right.
We don't remember a call exactly whether I took a package for him or he took a package for me. But either way, package came and we had to take it over to him or he took it over to me. And that's kind of how we met. And as it turns out, he's from New Jersey. We're the same age. So, we all know what Jim Nance ended up becoming. That was before he actually worked for CBS.
Yeah, that's right, because I think he was the analyst along with Hot Rod Hundley, wasn't he, for the Jazz Network?
Right. He did some stuff for the Jazz at the time. He was doing some local news and things like that. And he had told us at the time that CBS was looking for a new head anchor, call it whatever, the voice of CBS.
Yep.
And somebody had sent in his resume, and he was like one of 5 guys. Probably the least known of all the 5 that were up for the job.
Wow.
And as it turns out, long story short, he ends up getting a job and he's been there since. So, but anyways, Jim's from down in Marlboro. He went to Marlboro High School, which is down in Colts Neck, not not even an hour from here, 45 minutes or so. So, he played basketball in high school and golf and ended up going to University of Houston, and he was roommates with Fred Couples and a couple other, Blaine McAllister, who was a PGA professional. So, but Jim and I became very, very good friends, being the same age and being from New Jersey or whatever. So he was doing the game on Sunday, and he came down to the field before the game, took some pictures with us. So,
oh, fantastic!
With the whole family. So he knows most of my family, and it was great. Somebody said I haven't seen it yet because I haven't had time to watch the replay of the game, but I guess he gave a mention to what transpired during the third or fourth quarter. He gave a shout out to my dad and the rest of the family. So it was all good. We had a great time.
Oh, that's fantastic. And some great memories, no doubt, as well. And he's obviously one of the all-time greats and teamed up with Billy Packer for who knows how long doing the NCAA.
Jim's still been doing that. He still does NCAA. He does, obviously the NFL football and, everybody knows him for the NCAA finals and things like that. So, and I knew Billy Packer, and was another guy that I knew very well. So, and Billy used to do the games with Dick Enberg and Al McGuire when I was in college.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, that was the threesome they used to all call the national games. Al McGuire, Billy Packer, and Dick Enberg would do the games. So, and then Jim got involved, and, now he's NFL and NCAA basketball. And so the fact that I became very good friends with not only Billy Packer, but with Jim Nance, and, that's now 30 years later.
Now, you mentioned Bloomfield High School. Not only did you excel in basketball, but as I briefly mentioned before we started recording, in high school as well, you were an all-state soccer player, and you set some school records in high jump, javelin, and the shot put. So you're multi-talented, to say the least. I believe in your senior season there, you averaged about 36 points a game, and then you got to the state semi-finals and scored 52. So incredible stuff. Did you actually have any time to study?
You don't play either with George Seller or my parents. If you're not up in the classroom, you're not going to be up on the basketball court. Yeah, you had to put in the work at any level. You still have to do it. If you want to play, you got to put in the time in the classroom as well. But I was fortunate that I had a lot of good teachers, and I wasn't the a 4.0 straight A student, but I did pretty well in the classroom and did enough that you stay on top of things and get yourself into a good college. But high school for me was a great time of my life because that's when you start getting some freedoms and you start doing some other things. Like I said, I played soccer, and that kind of came about by accident. Ended up becoming an all-state soccer player, had scholarship offers to go play soccer.
Wow.
Used to play baseball and loved baseball, but a couple of my brothers were track and field guys, and I kind of fell in love with that and was kind of self-taught in the javelin and high jump. Never high jumped before in my life. I jumped like 6'4" my sophomore year, and then like 6'7" my junior year. So I was kind of on my way to about a 7-foot high jumper, but I had some tendonitis in my knees my senior year, probably from too much basketball or whatever, so I couldn't high jump my senior year. Oh, I was really good at the javelin. And people, don't know much about the javelin unless you really throw it. It's not like throwing a baseball. There's technique to it. And I was the Eastern States champion my senior year through like 217 feet and had scholarship offers to go do that. And it was always funny because when, I was getting recruited in basketball by my sophomore year, I scored 1,000 points my senior year alone, which was only done once or twice in state history. And as you mentioned, I averaged 36 points a game. But that didn't mean anything because you mentioned that semifinal loss in the States. We lost by 2 points to North Bergen High School, and I had, I think, 54. You might have said 52. I think it was 54, but
wow,
who's counting? But I still regret that to this day because my whole goal was to win another state championship for George Sella, and I feel like I failed in that regard. It still stings. I'll never forget that. But, so I was getting recruited at an early age, and then these other schools started being interested in myself for soccer and track and field. And some of the coaches would say, hey, to my specific coach in high school, we want to offer Kelly a scholarship. And the soccer coach would say, no, he's going to play basketball. The track coach at the college would say, what's he doing that for? He says, well, he's pretty good in basketball. And the guy would say, well, he can't be any better at basketball than he is at soccer. The guy had no idea. And the same thing happened with track. A couple of schools were going to let me do both.
All right.
I had schools that said, hey, you can play soccer and basketball if you want, or you can play track and basketball. But I wasn't doing that. And that was just all for fun to try to see what I could do. My track coach wanted me to be a decathlete, because I threw the javelin, I threw the discus, I threw the shot put. I could long jump, I could high jump. The only thing I never tried was the pole vault, and I would assume the hurdles were not easy as well. So those are the only things, but I didn't have enough time for that. And in between track practice and soccer practice, I'm still, out in the backyard playing basketball and working on my game because I knew that hopefully that I would have an opportunity to play at the next level. And I think I made the right choice.
Yeah, I think you did, but just some great opportunities there that you've had along the way as well. So it just shows how great of an athlete you were. And, of course, you had to make sure the study was up to date and you kept your grades up as well.
Always.
Courtesy of the Sports Illustrated Vault, which is an excellent resource online, I was intrigued to read about a July 1977 tournament that you took part in. It was an AAU youth tournament, and the article focused mostly on games that were played in Florida. I don't know if it was rotating to other cities as well, but players who took part included Albert King and Irvin Johnson, no less. In two of those games, you apparently knocked down 30 and then 41 points. Do you remember the tournament I'm talking about, and what comes to mind when I mention that time?
I'll tell you, I'll give you two answers to that. I certainly remember the time. I don't remember the specific games. I wouldn't be surprised if I had those. That was the National AAU tournament. Back in the day, unlike today, Adam, where AAU is like all year round, they play 100 some odd games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big fan of it because I think it's kind of ruined the game of basketball at every level. These kids are not learning the fundamentals of the game because when we played AAU, it was like a month. So you would play your AAU tournament during the month of May in your state, so to speak. So New Jersey, you got an AAU team. There were, 8, 10 teams or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have a month-long tournament, 1 or 2 games a week during the month, and you'd get a winner. That team would go to nationals and represent the state of New Jersey. So I played AAU my junior and senior year. My junior year, I was on the team. We lost in the finals to another team. And the rules at that time allowed the team who won could take one other guy from another team as kind of like, a free choice if he wanted to go with them to nationals. Well, we lost in the finals. That team asked me if I wanted to go with them. And, of course, I said yes.
Oh.
And that year, my junior year, I think we went to Ohio was the national tournament. So then you get all the teams from the different states coming there. The following year, my senior year, we won it all, and we took another kid from another team, and we went to Florida. And that's where the national tournament was. Now, you got to remember, my class was a very, very well-known class with a lot of good players.
It was stacked.
Irvin Johnson, Albert King, Gene Banks, a kid named Wayne McCoy, Darnell Valentine, Jeff Ruland. There was a picture, and you might have seen this, Adam, since you do your homework so well. There was a picture later on before my sophomore year. So that would have been 78, 79. So it would have been probably the fall of 78. Sports Illustrated ran a feature story inside with a fold-out picture called The Class with Class. And we were in a Chicago hotel all wearing tuxedos, and they picked what would amount to be like the super sophomores. And that was, guys like Irvin Johnson were on there, myself, Jeff Rulin, Albert King, Gene Banks, Danny Ainge. There were 10 of us, Herb Williams. Anyways, I think every guy in that picture, those 10 guys, end up becoming NBA players.
Incredible. And I actually didn't come across that photo. I wish I had, and I'm going to look for it.
You should look. That's your homework for the next time.
Definitely.
Go find that, because I have that picture hanging up in my room in here. I get a lot of comments of people who've seen that or have that. It's a fold-out picture. So you just picture opening up Sports Illustrated with two sides, and we're all in this really nice-looking hotel lobby in Chicago. So I know we took it in Chicago. And we're all wearing tuxedo tails.
Awesome.
You look that up, you'll find it. You'll be very impressed. I also heard you found the Class with Class photo.
I did indeed. It's fantastic. Absolutely love it.
I told you.
I couldn't find it initially after we chatted. I looked for it straight away after we ended the call, and then I had a good deep dive again about a week or so ago when I ended up emailing you the photos to show you that I had it, but all the amount of talent in the room as well, and to have you looking so stately. I'll include some photos in the show notes to this episode so listeners can see how great it is. But do you remember much about the photo shoot itself? Were they trying to get people to have particular looks and the way they were postured?
That was the whole idea of it, because somebody was going to call it the Class with Class. So obviously the word class, they wanted to put us in tuxedos with tails, and that's kind of what they were going at. That was a very popular Sports Illustrated photo. Those guys end up becoming very, very good pro players as well.
Yeah, just a great photo and a great way to look back at a period of time in your life that I'm sure your family have got a kick out of as well, having a look at over the years too, no doubt.
Well, it's something that we would, I don't want to say take for granted, for lack of a better phrase, and someone like you who wouldn't get that kind of coverage. So that would probably be really cool for people that don't get a whole lot of that stuff, and then look back and see exactly how it's covered. It's a lot different now. You get a lot more stuff. Back then, if you were a kid or whatever, where you're from, that would be big news.
Here in Australia, 1989 was when I first stumbled upon the NBA just by chance, recording a few games off TV. We used to get one game a week. We still didn't get a whole lot of magazines, and I'm sure Sports Illustrated was available to get, but I don't know in what sort of format it may have been. I think that's what actually makes it even more enjoyable, is trying to find these things that, as you say now, the stuff's everywhere. There's social media everywhere and whatever else, but
yeah, it's a big difference. You look back and, when you were a kid or whatever, and that photo was the fall of 78 or something, but, whether you're in Europe or Australia or whatever, you don't get that type of following like you do now, because you can get everything off of social media. To go back there and maybe see what you missed or didn't know, that's like a kid in a candy store. So for us, it was, we went through it. So it's old hat. Same thing with the Hornets and stuff like that when that first started. And makes me sick last night watching what's going on down in Charlotte. I'm actually very, very ticked off on these protests, and they're tearing my city up down there, which is ridiculous. But that's for another time.
Yeah, very sad news as well. And I think even the Hornets arena actually got looted, the team shop.
I knew exactly where they were because I've been down there plenty of time, and that's that street that they were all on. That's the epicenter is what they call it right there. There's all restaurants, and that's where you go eat and places to hang out. And then another couple 100 yards down the road, you go underneath the tram, and there's the arena on the left-hand side, and a hotel. I stayed next to the arena, and they're looting, and so these people are just. It makes me so angry because it's one thing to protest, but then once you have a protest, you always get the scum that comes to town, wherever it is, call them professionals or whatever, that are just looking for trouble and there to make trouble. And these are the people, somehow they justify, destroying other people's property and breaking windows and stealing stuff. Like, this will show you, it's really sad. So for me to watch that last night, which I did for a couple hours, it made me sick to my stomach.
It's really tragic stuff.
It's awful.
Well said.
But that was the AAU tournament, so to speak. So there were a lot of good talent. And, of course, Street and Smith was a big basketball magazine back then.
Yes.
covered all the high school players or whatever. So, guys like Erving and Albert King and Gene Banks were kind of like the three big names, maybe a couple of the guys, from our class. They got the most publicity. So to go down and play in that tournament with those guys or whatever gave you the first taste of playing against some nationally known guys. And, of course, I was fortunate to play in some of those high school all-star games. The McDonald's wasn't, I think it came the year after that. But I played in like the Derby Classic, and the Dapper Dan was a big high school all-star game in Pittsburgh, and those guys all played in it. So it's a lot different now. Again, going back to AAU, there's 100 some odd games. These kids become immune to losing. You know what I mean? When you play that many games, it's like, and I don't like that because, they lose a game and they're numb because they know in 10 minutes there's another game. And then the coach throws the ball out and they're not learning how to set screens or move without the ball or come off a screen or one dribble jump shot. It's all, up and down, 3-pointers. You get the ball off the rebound and then you shoot it. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that type of game has slowly crept from AAU into the high school, into college, and now into the NBA. It's not as much team ball as it used to be. These kids are very individually talented, but I don't think fundamentally it helps their game, and I don't think the teams are not nearly as good as when I was fortunate to play, particularly in the NBA in the 80s. That's my opinion.
You make an excellent point, and it's all about, it seems to be all about the highlight reels these days and getting clips on YouTube so that you can get recognized and move up again and again to other levels.
That's the evil of ESPN and the phone and Twitter and all this other stuff that we didn't have back in the day. I'll stand by to the day I die, and hopefully that's a long time away, that, the 80s were as good as the NBA has ever been.
Yep.
So when you look at the talent and the guys I played with and the teams, and, we didn't have these weakling teams, that they have now. So, and hey, I'm not going to take anything away from, there's some great individual players, whether it's LeBron or Steph or Kevin Durant or whatever. The teams are just not as good. They play a completely different game. Hey, back when they put the 3-pointer in, when I just started in the NBA, it came in like 1978 or 9 or whatever, right around 80. I mean, first couple of years, we hardly ever took a 3-pointer because it wasn't considered a good shot. You only used it to catch up. Now you see it, that's all they take is 3-pointers. So nobody really has the mid-range game. And a lot of these kids, particularly in college, where the 3-pointer is short, they have no business taking 3-pointers. But, there's a lot of things I don't like about the game. But at the same time, it's a different era. So, to each his own. It's just one guy's opinion, but it's certainly not the same.
I agree wholeheartedly there. So for what that's worth. I'll also need to track down that photo now that you've talked about, the fold-out photo from Sports Illustrated.
You better.
Can't wait to find that because I'm livid I didn't find it before we chatted today because I'm sure it'd be an awesome one to look at and see some of the people in the photo. Now, I'm sure that your college recruiting process was unique given your dad's links to Notre Dame, but do you mind just briefly chatting about what schools were closest to having you sign on the dotted line before you committed to Digger Phelps and the Fighting Irish?
Yeah, no problem. That was easy, actually, because, the whole recruiting process, I didn't really care for a whole lot. Again, it goes back to being busy, playing 3 sports, trying to fit in the opportunity to go visit some of these colleges. I mean, I was certainly thankful, and I had my choice of pretty much any college or university in the country. At that time, you go back to like UCLA with John Wooden, and, he was kind of finishing up there. And, I grew up watching those great teams that he had. What kid wouldn't want to go to UCLA? But at that time, for me, I was trying to continue to play my different sports. And you were allowed, I think, 6 visits at that time as part of the NCAA rules. I ended up only going to 4 different places because I just either couldn't find the time. And I really wanted to narrow this down because, you get your kid, you think it's cool that you get all these letters and, they come to the basketball office or they come to your home and you got, stacks and boxes and, just thousands of letters.
Yeah.
And after a while, they're just sending you something every day. And I didn't really want to get involved in all this. I thought, well, let's try to narrow this down as quickly as possible. So for me, it ended up coming down. I ended up taking 2 visits in the fall and this is another thing that's changed a lot. I didn't visit any place until the fall of my senior year, and I took 2 in the spring. So I didn't decide where I was going, I think, until April of my senior year. These kids are committing now as sophomores. They got to change those rules with the NCAA. I just don't. They need to keep these people out and let these kids just play and not let them get full of themselves that early. They get distracted. I mean, to be recruiting kids as 8th graders and 9th graders and 10th graders, I don't think they should be allowed to come to the schools and contact the kids until the start of their junior year. When September 1 of their junior year, okay, now you can start sending them letters, talking to them, calling them or whatever. But these kids that are 12, 13, 14, it's too early. But I ended up taking a visit I went to Notre Dame, and I went out there for a football game, which is what you have to go to.
Yep.
That's a must. So I was definitely going out there for a football weekend and visit, which I did. And I also went to Duke, and that was pre-Mike Krzyzewski. Bill Foster was the coach then. And really enjoyed that. And I think I also went to South Carolina, was coached by the legendary Frank McGuire. And I went there because he had a great connection. He's a New York guy. So he had a lot of guys from New York area, New York, New Jersey, where I'm from. And he ran a great program. So I went there, really wasn't leaning to there, but I was curious. And Columbia, South Carolina is a very nice place. And I went to the University of Maryland, which was coached by Lefty Driesell. So, I thought the visits were all kind of the same. Obviously, nothing's like a Notre Dame football weekend. At that time, growing up in my family with my father, went to Notre Dame. His best friend and business partner was Angelo Bertelli, who was the Heisman Trophy winner in 1943.
Okay, wow.
We knew him as Uncle Bert. So everybody just assumed I was going to Notre Dame, because of my father, which really is not true. As my father would have said, I went there, but I'm not going back. It's where you want to go. You're going to do the 4 years. You got to go where you want to go. You don't go where I went because I went there. Even though a lot of people still talked about, oh, you're going to Notre Dame. You're always going to Notre Dame. You know what? I almost went to Maryland. That was probably my second choice because Lefty Driesell was a really good recruiter, a really nice guy. They ran a great program. It was very hard to say no to him. Duke probably would have been my third choice. Very nice campus, a lot like Notre Dame's campus. But for the reason that I went to Notre Dame was at that time, they were an up-and-coming team. They were starting to get nationally known. It wasn't just everybody knew about the football program. What's not to know about the football program? So they were starting to make some waves in the basketball world. They had a guy named Austin Carr, played for them back in the early 70s. He kind of put them on the map, was a great player. Then they had John Shoemate, Gary Brokaw, Adrian Dantley were a few years before me, and that's when they broke UCLA's 88-game win streak. So I think they kind of put them on the map. And then a couple of years before I got there, they were playing some good basketball. And Notre Dame was an independent at the time, which was kind of strange because now it's like just the opposite. All kids want to be part of, a conference, and whether it's the Big East or the ACC or the Pac-12 or whatever. At that time, Notre Dame was an independent, and I thought that was a positive because they didn't play, the same teams all the time. Notre Dame played all over the country. We went down to Texas. We went back east to play in Madison Square Garden or the Palestra, out to California and played UCLA. We went up and played DePaul and Marquette. So it seemed like Notre Dame was on TV every weekend on NBC, and I wanted to be a part of that. And as it turned out, we were on TV, it seemed like, every weekend because we had a great 4-year run. We were like 93 and 27, very successful, and people saw me every weekend. And at that time, playing 4 years in college, people couldn't believe I was still there. They thought I was there for 8 years because they were so tired of seeing me every week. They just thought I was you're still there? So that was probably the main reason, Adam, that I went to Notre Dame. It was the right time for the basketball and the opportunity to play on TV and play at a national schedule, play all over the country. And we played anybody. We weren't afraid to play anybody. And I don't have any regrets about the decision. I mean, South Bend winters are horrible. It's cold. It snows. I would have liked to have gone someplace warmer. But as far as my career and, where I went, and a great education and a national following. You know, if it wasn't on the map before I went, or if it was close, we put them over the top because we had it was the toughest place to play, and we went to a Final Four. Probably should have went to more than one, but we were a top 10 team all 4 years that I was at Notre Dame. So that ended up being the reason why I went there, and I don't have any regrets about that.
You had a super run those 4 years, really. You made the tournament, as you said, each season you were there. And I'm just going to go through a quick roll call of some of the great players that you were teammates with as well during this time. Bill Laimbeer for 2 seasons, Orlando Woolridge all 4 years, Bill Hanzlik for 3, and then Johnny Paxson for 2. So I don't even know where to begin, but do you mind just sort of reminiscing a little bit about playing with these guys who all went on to have great careers in the NBA as well?
Well, I mean, I was fortunate that my graduating class, the guys that we brought in when I was a freshman, I was probably the most known of the 5 guys, but we were a very good class. I mean, Orlando Woolridge was not a nationally known guy. He was kind of raw, certainly turned into a great player. God rest his soul. He passed away a few years ago, way too soon. But he ended up becoming a longtime NBA player and did very well. Tracy Jackson was a very well-known kid out of Silver Springs, Maryland, down by where DeMatha High School, a very well-known high school in the D.C. area. He was a great player, played in the NBA as well.
Yep.
A kid named Stan Wilcox, who's now the athletic director of Florida State, was out of New York, and he was part of our class. And then a big, tall Mexican, Gilberto Salinas, 7 foot, about 110 pounds he looked like. He was the tallest person I'd ever seen. I mean, he was a tall drink of water, but he was my roommate my freshman year and a real nice kid. Didn't play a whole lot, but that class was one of the, even maybe the most successful, if not one of the most successful classes at Notre Dame history. And, when you look back at my 4 years, Adam, we had like 11 guys that I played with end up going to the NBA. I mean, you mentioned some of them, but I can go back. When I was a freshman, 2 of the seniors were a kid named Dave Batten and a kid named Duck Williams. They were both captains. They both played in the NBA for a couple of years. Didn't have long careers, but they were good players. And you mentioned Bill Laimbeer. Also, another kid in that class was Bruce Flowers. He played in the NBA as well, along with Laimbeer, who had a great career. Then Bill Hanzlik was the year above me. And another kid who I thought was going to be an NBA player, but didn't quite make it, Rich Branning, a kid out of California, who we probably would have thought would have been a sure thing at the time, but he was one of the last cuts of the Indiana Pacers, never made it to the NBA, but he was a real good player. And in my class, obviously, Orlando Woolridge played a long time. Tracy Jackson played in the NBA for a few years, myself. And then behind me, a couple of years after, John Paxson, long career with the Bulls. A kid named Joe Klein played a long time in the NBA, played 1 year at Notre Dame and transferred because his father did not like Digger. He was a big, tall, redheaded kid from Slater, Missouri, about 6'11". And then a kid named Tom Sluby played a cup of coffee with the NBA as well. So, I mean, there's like 11 guys in that group during my 4 years. So that says a lot about the program that Notre Dame had. And it was a very, very talented group and probably should have been, I swear by, we should have been more successful than we were, even though we were very successful. I think sometimes having that many kids and that much talent, Digger didn't know what to do with it and tried to satisfy too many people rather than sticking with 5 or 6, 7 rotation. We used to say there was always a chair near the scorer's table of somebody going in and out. And I think that kind of frustrated a lot of people. But, hey, we had great teammates. We all enjoy ourselves. We would have liked to have been a little more successful and go back to the Final Four. But I think there's nothing you can take away from the success that at least that I had for my 4 years, because it was at the top.
It was a stellar run for sure. I'd just like to touch on one game from the college run there before we just chat about the NBA. But you mentioned the Final Four there. You went up against Sid Moncrief and his Arkansas Razorbacks. What did you sort of make of the game at the time, looking back, and the opportunity to possibly get to that championship game that just fell short?
I regret that it happened so soon. Maybe regret's a strong word. You come out of high school, and then less than a year later, you're at the Final Four. I mean, I was fortunate and a very confident, player at that time. So, I went to Notre Dame. I wanted to play. Freshmen could play back then. I prepared myself that I was going to find a way to get on the floor. I never backed down from anybody, and anybody that knows me as a player, would tell you the exact same thing. I was a smart player. I was physically developed so I could handle it, and I was very confident. I didn't start the first couple of games, but as a freshman, I ended up about 4 or 5 games in, I became a starter. So I really worked at my game and was prepared to play. And I was very successful my freshman year. You know, I knew my place, and I was one of the leading scorers, and I was the MVP of the Midwest Regional my freshman year when we won and sent Notre Dame to its one and only Final Four. It's never happened since, and but the problem for me was that it just happened so quick. You didn't have time to an old saying, to stop and smell the roses, because, you know, again, it's happening so fast. You go from that disappointment that we talked about earlier, Adam, in that state semifinal game, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, less than a year, I'm in St. Louis at the Final Four. That's kind of why I wish we would have gone back. I didn't really get to enjoy it as much because it happened so quickly. But when you look at the teams that were there, Arkansas, you mentioned, they had 3 tremendous players. Ronnie Brewer, Sidney Moncrief, and Marvin Delph were very well-known players, all played in the NBA. They were a real good team, but we lost to Duke, where I just mentioned that I almost went there, with Mike Jaminski, Gene Banks, Jim Spinarkle. That was a really good team, and I almost could have been a part of that team. Kind of ironic that we ended up playing them in the semifinals. We had blown through the tournament, pretty much. We were playing really good. We played somebody at Oral Roberts, University of Houston. We beat them by 30 in the first round. And then we beat University of Utah in the regional semi, and then beat DePaul, who was a rival of ours. We played them during the regular season, coached by the great Ray Meyer. And, you know, they had a great team with Dave Corzine and Gary Garland and Clyde Bradshaw and Mark Aguirre. Mm-hmm. You know, so that was a really good team, and we beat them to get to the Final Four. We won that game out in Kansas, and then we get to the Final Four. We got to play that Duke team that I just mentioned, and we had been playing so well, and for some reason we had a terrible first half, just not the way we'd been playing. And fortunately, we got behind, but we played very well the second half and actually cut it to 2 and had the ball to tie the game, and we missed a shot. And we end up going down by, 2 or 3. We might have had to foul or whatever. But, that first half really did us in. And that's really disappointing because we were playing. It was just very uncharacteristic. Hey, Duke's a great team. Maybe they had something to do with it. But, sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot. You don't make shots. You turn the ball over. You just don't get in the rhythm. And we were able to get back in the game and play our game. If we had played like we did in the second half and the first half, we probably would have went on and played in the final. As it turned out, Kentucky was playing Duke in the final because Kentucky beat Arkansas. And Kentucky, we had played during the year as well. They were a big physical team, more like a football team with Goose Gibbons and Rick Roby and a kid named Phillips, who was just built just like Roby, and they had Kyle Macy and a few other guys. But we had lost to them by a point or 2 down in Louisville right around Christmas. So we were assuming we were going to play them again and get revenge, but it didn't work out. We ended up losing, like I said, to Duke by 2 or 3, and then Kentucky was going to play Duke after they beat Arkansas. And at that time, you had to play a consolation game, which they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, well, you don't want to go to the Final Four weekend and lose twice.
No, that's right.
That's why they don't do that anymore. But at that time, we had to turn around and play on Monday night before the final game between Duke and Kentucky. We had to play Sidney Moncrief and Marvin Delph and Ron Brewer in a consolation game. And as it turns out, game's tied, and it's really a hard game to get up for because, what are you playing for? The only thing you're playing for is you don't want to lose 2 games. Well, they come down, and Ronnie Brewer hits like a 30-footer at the buzzer. So we go to the Final Four in 1978, and we lose 2 games by a total of 4 or 5 points. You go 0-2, and you go, and I mean, that's really disappointing.
It's tough, very tough.
Yeah, I mean, you're just so close, and we could have easily been in the final game, and that was the game that Goose Gibbons went crazy against Duke and had like 40 points. But I think physically we were the better matchup for Kentucky because, one, we had played them, and Two, the size was very similar because we had big guys like Laimbeer and Batten and Flowers, to battle guys like Phillips and Roby and Goose Given. So I think everybody wanted that game, including us, but we didn't live up to our side of the bargain, and we end up losing 2 games, which is really hard to imagine when you think about it. Over a weekend, having to go to Final Four and you get beat twice by a total of 4 or 5 points, and you got nothing to show for it. But again, that was the times, and Kentucky ended up being champions, and Notre Dame has not gone back to the Final Four since. So I guess we're still kind of proud in that regard, and it's been a long time since then, but still we're the only team ever to make it there.
Some great memories, but oh so close, I guess, and it's just maybe a what if. But my apologies, I got the teams mixed up. I was saying that you lost in the Final Four to Arkansas, but it was actually that consolation game you were talking about. So you lost the Final Four to Duke.
Yeah, no worries. It's still a loss, Adam, either way. So we lost 1 and we lost 2, but they were both very close ball games, and it was a lot of fun. And I had my family there at that time, and they enjoyed the Checker Dome in St. Louis, and there were some funny stories there as well. I guess somebody had stole my family's tickets from the hotel, a couple of them or somehow. And I remember hearing the story after the game that whoever stole them, they either sold them or those people came to the game. And, of course, they sat down in the seats. And then my family said, "What are you doing in these seats? Who gave those tickets?" So long story short, they end up coming and arresting these guys because they came to the game or something like that, and they stole the seats that were supposed to be my family's seats. So it's always something with the Tripuckas, so it's not a surprise.
The people that stole the tickets sort of gave it away by sitting in those seats next to other family members of yours?
I don't know whether they end up selling them if they pleaded the fifth or said that they got them from somebody else, but I know they were taking back the question whether they solved it or not, but it made for a funny story, at least for the weekend.
I found a great article, February 1980, I believe. You beat DePaul in double overtime.
Yeah, we had a habit of doing that.
You guys had some great wins at home, particularly, and upsetting some massive teams, UCLA included.
We beat like 7 number 1 teams during the course of my 4 years.
Yeah, incredible. And I just found a great article yesterday about that game, and there's a classic photo. Actually, there's 2 photos in the one article. One of them shows yourself celebrating with the game ball, just a close-up of yourself, and then the other one's a shot where it's got Bill Hanzlik. You are front and center as well, celebrating after the win as well. So it looks like it was chaotic scenes and bedlam.
Yeah, that was like one of the first times they allowed, fans to rush to court and things like that. Now it's like they do that every freaking game. But, we only did it when it was like really important. And I guess when you're beating the number 1 team, that was pretty important. So now it's kind of old hat and a little crazy.
Now, just moving on to the 1981 NBA draft. You were one of 9 future All-Stars, which is a great draft class, no doubt, and it was held in New York on June the 9th. You were picked up at number 12 overall by the Detroit Pistons. Now, when you entered the draft, what expectations did you have of where you may be headed?
I didn't really know a lot. I mean, again, it's funny that because I've been a part of broadcasting and scouting in the NBA up until a couple of years ago for like 20 some odd years. Mm-hmm. I see how much it's changed. Obviously, we watch the draft on TV now. It's a big party. Back in 1981, it wasn't anything like that. Basically, what it was is they invited you to New York at the Grand Hyatt. The draft was actually in a ballroom, no cameras and all the hoopla that surrounded it now.
Yeah,
I went through the process after the season at Notre Dame, played in a couple of college all-star games. In fact, was able to enjoy a trip to Las Vegas. They had an all-star game there, and I won the MVP in that all-star game. We went to the Aloha Classic out in Hawaii, which when you go to school in South Bend, Indiana, where it freaking snows like all the time and it's cold, you're not going to turn down a trip to Hawaii. So I went to Hawaii. I made the all-tournament team, able to spend about 10 days out there. I didn't want to come back to finish the school the senior year. My point being, I was very successful in the postseason. I also played in the Coaches All-Star Classic, which is at the Final Four, my senior year, which was in Philadelphia, and did well in that game. So I had set myself up pretty good between my senior year and the All-Star games, the postseason. So I was assuming I was going to be a pretty high pick. now they start contacting you, the pro teams, they do some interviews or whatever, but it's nothing like it is now. It was really kind of nonchalant compared to what they go through now. And these kids going around and working out for the team. We never worked out for anybody. You know what I mean? They may talk to you a little bit. That was about it. They just basically go on what they've seen in the postseason or your senior year or whatever. So I was told I was going to be somewhere, I would say I was going to be somewhere around 6 to 11.
Right.
There were a couple teams I thought I might go to, but you're sitting in that room and you have no idea when you're going to go. I thought maybe Chicago, they were like at 7 or something at that time. I don't remember the exact order. The only thing I knew I wasn't going to go, but they end up lying to me, which is nothing new in the NBA. And my mom was there with me because they were a local team, the New Jersey Nets at that time, where they had 2 picks.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that actually.
They had 2 picks. The Pistons had 2 picks, and the Dallas Mavericks, I believe, had 2 picks. And I thought possibly maybe Dallas, their second pick, I forget where that was exactly, but the Nets picked 3rd and 10th, I believe.
Exactly right.
So I thought I'd go to 10, but Larry Brown was the coach at that time. And he actually said, number one, they weren't going to take a small forward because they had Michael Korn, who was a friend of mine. I played against in high school and AAU. He was a year ahead of me. And he was drafted the year before along with Mike Jaminski from Duke. And they said they weren't going to take a small forward because he was there. Okay, I have no problem with that. If that's the way you're thinking and you have 2 picks. I think they took Buck Williams at number 3 behind Aguirre and Isiah, who went to Dallas and Detroit respectively. I didn't have a big problem. So then when, I didn't go to 9, I think it was maybe Dallas's other pick. I'm not sure. But all of a sudden 10 came and I figured, well, I'm not going to go here. So I'm not really interested. And then they end up taking Albert King. And man, I was PO'd. I mean, they lied to me because Albert King was a small forward. So if you tell me you're not going to take a small forward and you didn't take Albert King, that kind of makes me mad because I think I had a better career than Albert King and I was, bigger and stronger and done more. And you could have taken me. And obviously at that time, it would have been nice to play at home.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, they out and out lied to me. So my mom was probably more upset than me because obviously being in New Jersey and a chance to see her son play or whatever. How could you go wrong by taking a local kid who grew up literally 10 minutes from the Meadowlands?
That's right. That's why I was really keen to ask because I knew that looking back through Basketball Reference, which is just a fantastic website, it breaks down the whole draft. And I know that with New Jersey having those 2 picks right around your selection as well, I thought, yeah. Did you ever entertain the thought that you could play for the Nets and to have them tell you, no, they weren't going to pick somebody in that position and then do the opposite? Well, not great.
Yeah. No, it was very frustrating. Like I said, I grew up literally, I could get to the Meadowlands where they played 10 minutes from my house. 10 minutes. You thought like, well, wait a minute. How good is your PR department? This is good in a number of ways because you got a local kid and you're looking at attendance and he had a successful career, whatever. I mean, I didn't let it bother me a whole lot other than the fact that they lied to me. I didn't really care. But if you can't tell the truth, then what do you have? So they kind of lie. I never heard the explanation or really care anymore. But it's just that the fact that they said something and did another. That kind of hurt. And then all of a sudden, so that got me mad. Now all of a sudden we're getting to 11. I'm going, geez, why aren't I getting picked about now? So I think 11 was Washington. Yeah, Frank Johnson, a guard from Wake Forest.
You've got great recall.
I might go to them because you got to remember at that time, you're thinking about the teams, what you know about the team. So now all of a sudden, I didn't go there, and I thought that was a real possibility. And people told me they almost took me at 11, Washington. So now that goes to 12, and I know nothing about Detroit other than that they're one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the league. And I'm thinking, well, after that is Utah. And I don't want to go there. So I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I just remember sitting in my seat there, and I'm looking up at the Detroit guy that's at the table there, and he ends up becoming a very good friend of mine later on. His name's Harry Hutt. He became one of my bosses because I ended up doing 8 years of television for them. But he became a really good friend of mine, and he was the head of marketing and broadcasting for the Pistons, and he used to work the table, answer the phone or whatever. And I remember this guy looking at me, and I'm thinking, who's this bald guy looking at me. Yeah, he'll probably say he wasn't that bald back then. But and he's sitting there pointing to me, and I'm wondering, what is he doing? Now, I knew that they had taken Isiah at number 2, so this was their second pick.
Yeah. All
of a sudden, the Commissioner O'Brien made the call, and I'm going to Detroit. So I went up there and shook his hand, and I knew nothing about Detroit other than that they were a horrible team, Adam. I'm going, oh, boy, I'm not used to losing. It ended up being a godsend because I think Isiah and I, who had got to know him a little bit before that through the tryouts for the Olympics in 1980, which we never end up going to, but I went to tryouts and flew home with him. I think we dropped him off at Bloomington at Indiana, and we had played against each other, obviously, on the schedule as well. So I knew he was a lot like me, and he was younger because he came out early, but he didn't want to lose either. So he and I were in this together. It ended up being a godsend because we ended up putting Detroit on the map, the two of us. I know they assumed they were getting something special in him at the 2 pick, but I think after the season that I had, my rookie year, I think they felt like they stepped in what because they ended up getting 2 kids that made the All-Star team as rookies, and we became very good friends, and we were part of the resurgence. We bought Detroit, put them back on the map, and we started winning some games. Kind of took off from there. So at first it was a little rocky, going out there and wondering whether we were going to sign a contract. There was a little bit of a contract problem. And, obviously now they're all slotted, so it was a little different back then. It ended up turning out very well. So that was the right place for me at that time, and it was a great start to my pro career.
Yeah, you had a fantastic rookie season, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But you did mention the 1980 Olympics that never happened in terms of Team USA taking part. Do you mind if we just hark back there for a moment and you talk about those trials and the tryouts that you're involved in and what your experience was with that? Because it was a great team loaded with super talent and unfortunately never had the chance to display that on the international stage.
No, they didn't. Obviously those things sometimes are out of your control.
Mm.
The higher-ups were deciding what we were going to do, obviously, with things with Russia and all of those stuff. President at that time, Carter, I believe, says we're not going. And, it's tough particularly at that time because it was more, Olympics was more about amateurism, and a lot of these people, there weren't NBA players going at the time. You had college kids, and, a lot of these people in other sports were working, 4 years to go, and all of a sudden you're not allowed to go. So it's tough for those people. But for us, the tryouts, I didn't like the process. I thought it was kind of phony, lack of a better word. They were held down at University of Kentucky. I was fortunate to be invited to go down there, but I think the whole process was kind of rigged, in my opinion, because, they moved some guys around and put certain guys on certain teams so they looked better. And then there were certain coaches there, and it seemed like, whoever had their coach there was going to get picked. And I don't ever felt like I was given a fair shot. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I ended up not making the team, but some of the picks were a little peculiar, to say the least. Digger wasn't fighting for us or whatever, and it seemed like, Dean Smith was down there, and Bobby Knight got his guys, and a couple of Kentucky guys and things like that. So I'm not sure about the whole process. It just seemed like they moved certain guys around to put them on better teams to make them look better, and I never felt like it was a fair shot. But, as it turned out, it's not like I was happy they didn't go. It's not good for anybody when they don't go. But basketball is certainly different in the Olympics with the college kids. I almost wish they'd go back to that. Not a big Olympic fan now in regards to the basketball. I think it's kind of a joke, particularly after the Dream Team. I mean, that was always a big thing back then because, the U.S. was sending their college kids, whereas the other countries were, they're sending men.
Yes.
Guys, their Olympic team, they play with each other all year long, and most of the time those guys are, like NBA guys as far as age, you're getting 28, 29, 30-year-old guys playing against 19, 20-year-old kids. In my opinion, that all changed because some of the European teams were getting better and they were starting to challenge, and some of these guys were showing up in the NBA and they were starting to get a little full of themselves and saying they were the best teams. So then the Dream Team came along and they said, "Oh, you think you're really good, huh? Well, let's see you try to beat this team. And, of course, we know what happened. That kind of put everybody like, okay, now you understand who's the best team in the world. It's the United States. So, and I understood that. It was great. It was a tremendous team, a lot of fun. Nobody could touch them. The cast of characters was off the charts. Now I'd like to see them, and it's changed. Again, you got all these other countries now have so many guys that also play in the NBA. So they've gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
I would like to see one of two things. I would either like to see them go back to having the college kids play, after an NBA season. What do we have to prove? We know that everybody tries to play in the NBA. That's the ultimate league. So that's where the best players are. Do we have to prove as a country that we're the best team every 4 years? In my opinion, I don't think so, particularly after the Dream Team. So I'd like to see the kids go back to doing it. And, hey, if we lose, they lose, But at the same time, if the other countries are going to start using pros, whether it's Argentina or, Australia doesn't have as many, but they've got a few, whether it's Spain or Croatia or whatever. I mean, there seems to be an NBA in every country now. If that doesn't work or they don't like that idea, guys shouldn't have an opportunity to play more than once. These guys that play 3 Olympics or 4 Olympics, I don't understand that. It's not necessary, particularly when you got a contract and you're an NBA owner. I don't want to see my guy go through an 82-game schedule or 100-game schedule with playoffs and then be playing in the summer or whatever. You do it once, you win, that's it. That's your shot. You don't get to come back. In other words, give other people an opportunity, because I think the NBA could send about, look at this year's team. And there were like 7 or 8 guys that dropped out.
Yeah.
They brought in the next row. You could probably do that about 6 times and come up with a team. I mean, you still have to pick a team that will play together, and maybe this team didn't, as some people, or I've read, didn't play that well together, because it gets back to what I mentioned earlier in the interview about guys getting selfish and AU, basketball, worried about scoring. Who cares who scores? It's the Olympics. You're trying to win a gold medal. Nobody cares how much you score. It's not like you got a contract like you do at the NBA. So it should matter. But these guys don't understand that. So that kind of irks me a little bit. So I really wish that if they stick with the pros, you shouldn't be allowed to go more than once. So that way you get more people have an opportunity to play if they want to. If you don't, you ask the next guy, and so on and so forth. So that's just my opinion. Whether you like it or not, that's how I think it should be. So it's changed from when I tried out in 1980, obviously, and we're so used to watching the college kids. I wouldn't mind seeing them get a chance, because I think it'd be kind of cool to go back that way, but I'm not sure it's going to happen ever again.
You make some very valid points there, and I really appreciate the honesty as well and the candor. So it's refreshing. One thing I wanted to ask you about, we briefly talked about your first pro coach, Scotty Robertson.
Mm-hmm.
He preceded the great Chuck Daly. What do you recall about Scotty Robertson? Because he's a figure in the NBA that I honestly don't know a whole lot about. I've only sort of heard his name mentioned here and there, but what can you tell us firsthand from being alongside Scotty for a few years?
Well, I owe Scotty a lot because he believed in me. He was the first coach, my coach in the NBA. And he was a Southern guy from Louisiana. I say pecan, and he'd say, Kelly, it's pecan. It's not pecan, it's pecan. And he had that drawl. He'd been around a little while. In fact, even after he got fired, he worked as an assistant for a couple of guys, including Pat Riley.
Oh, okay.
In Miami. So, but Scotty was a good old boy, as we call him. I got along with him. He believed in me. So I have a special place because I'd like to think that I won the job. And obviously I did, because I beat out some veteran guys. But, he knew my talents, and along with Isiah, trying to teach him how to become a point guard, get his teammates involved, because he was so talented, he'd kind of forget. And that had to be the rule of thumb. And I think if you asked Isiah now, he understood. It took him a while because he could score, but that was something he had to learn to try to make sure that he got other players involved before he got involved. And I think that was the rule of thumb for a point guard, to be a great point guard in this league. You can score, and he certainly could, but it was more important that he got his teammates involved first, to get them, involved in the game quickly. And then there's always time for him to be able to get involved as well. And Scotty used to always emphasize and push that on him. And for me, Scotty always believed that, the way he ran the offense was certainly conducive to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I played over 3,000 minutes. I was like third in the league in minutes played, second or third my rookie year in the league. And we played an up-tempo brand. We wanted to run. If you didn't have to run a play the entire game, that was a good thing.
Yep.
Everything was fast break. You get out and run. You stop people. You can get out easy baskets. If you didn't, the fast break flowed into your offense. So it just kind of melded together, and that's what Scotty always emphasized. And, he played me a lot of minutes and, played to my strengths. And I liked him. Other guys that didn't necessarily get along with him, Scotty had his sayings and his Southern attitude and things like that. But, I enjoyed playing for him, and he was very good for my career in the first couple of years. And obviously, Chuck is a Hall of Fame coach, and he was great as well. But Scotty was just different. And, going through the first couple of years, particularly your rookie year, you don't know what to expect. It was kind of tough. We had like 18 two-a-days my first training camp.
Wow.
That was unheard of because camp was just so long. Now they go to camp for 5 days. They have like 3 days of two-a-days. I thought it was never going to end. I was dying. Every day was 2 days. And then we played our first exhibition game, and he got mad the way we played. And he said, we're going to go back to 2 days. And it's almost like you're going, no, I can't do it.
Wow.
But I remember it. So, I enjoyed Scotty. He became a very good friend of mine, and his family, his wife was very nice. And, was sorry to see him go. But I mean, that's the business side of the NBA. Guys get hired and fired. But I enjoyed playing for Scotty. And even after he was fired, and it was always nice to see him. I'm thankful for how he treated me and gave me a shot, and I'd like to think that I earned everything I got. It was a good couple of years playing for Scotty. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, you had a heck of a rookie season. You signed with the Pistons in late September, only a couple of days before that training camp opened, and it was held at the University of Michigan. Do you remember much about the camp, aside from those, 2 a days you're talking about there? How was the mix of personalities and players and then molding into the team that you'd become for that 81-82 campaign?
I did sign late, but, that's part of negotiations, I guess. It's so different than it is now, but you're trying to get the best deal, and that's something your agent does. And Bob Wolf and his people were trying to negotiate a contract, and you're sitting at home wondering whether, you're going to be there for the opening of camp, and thankfully it all worked out.
Mm-hmm.
It's brand new. You're nervous, you're uneasy, you're exactly what's this going to entail. I mean, it's still basketball, but at the same time, it's training camp, and it's 2 days, and you go through the fundamentals and the drills and getting in shape, and it's just repetitive. And I don't think I ever anticipated that you'd go that long, particularly now. Again, I emphasize training camp is not even a week before they start playing the games, and it was longer than it was almost 3 weeks before we play. I mean, just every single day practice, the monotony of going through the same thing and doing the same thing. It's like you're sore, you're sitting in buckets of ice, trying to get the lactic acid out of your legs, and you hurt. And, even though you're 22 years old or whatever, I'm like going, when is this going to be over? You just want to play games. We end up playing the Indiana Pacers, I think, the first exhibition game. I think it was in Michigan somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
George McGinnis was on the Indiana Pacers, a great star from the ABA.
Indeed.
He was built like a linebacker. I mean, George was just a big man, muscles and everything else. And, I'm sitting there going, I'm on the floor with George McGinnis. And I must have got my shot blocked in that game about 6 times. And, we struggled. And I told you, Scotty was upset with us and said we're going to go back to 2 days. It was like, there was a big groan, like, no, you can't do that. No, there's no way. So, well, we survived whatever those 18 two-a-days or whatever it was. It just seemed like forever. It was never going to end. So you just couldn't wait for the regular season to start. The exhibition games, at that time we played like 8 of them. Some of the small little podunk towns wasn't really a lot of fun back in those days, because now they kind of play at their own arenas or still play in the NBA arenas. We would go to some of these little tiny towns in the middle of nowhere and play in front of a couple hundred people. And you're like going, what's the point of this? Staying in crappy hotels and, you just want to get the regular season going and say, well, this has got to be better than this. There was a reason for it. You had to adjust. I learned how to get my shot off. That was the biggest thing from that first game. You have to make adjustments as a player. And I hardly got my shot blocked the rest of the time in the league. You understand timing and figure it out, and persistence. And I was very persistent. And even though I get my shot blocked, I get it back and put it back up. If I got it blocked again, I put it back up again to either get fouled or you score or whatever. So it was a tough camp. It was a rude awakening, I guess you could say, for that first year. But I'm also in the NBA, and I'm also a starter. And, that's a big accomplishment. The Pistons were a terrible team the year before. So it seemed like they couldn't do any worse than what they were doing. But now we had 2 first-round picks and a couple of guys that were holdovers from the year before. So, they wanted to get better. We had to create some excitement. And between Isiah Thomas and I mean, he got all the publicity because he was a hired, number 2 draft pick. And a lot of people knew more about him. I think they were expecting him to be great. I don't think they were expecting me. So as it turned out, I almost won the Rookie of the Year. I still think I should have won the Rookie of the Year because I was the 12th pick and Buck Williams won it. And he played for New Jersey, so he was, near all the media or whatever. But for the 3rd pick, I think he did what he was supposed to, but I don't think anybody ever thought I was going to have the type of year that I had. That's just me. We put Detroit back on the map, and from then, they had a long, long history leading to 2 world championships. I'd like to think that I had something to do with that, along with some other guys.
We'll get back to that rookie season of yours. You had a great season. You played all 82 games, and at 21.6 points a game, you were just 0.3 of a point behind the leading scorer for Detroit of John Long. The team improved dramatically, as you mentioned as well, from the season prior, and along with Isiah, you were named to the 82 All-Star game. So before I just ask you about your All-Star memories, what are your thoughts on that first year in the NBA and the difference that happened with the franchise of Detroit?
Well, I was excited. I mean, the fact that, we had started to put people in the stands. Nobody used to come to the games in Detroit. We played at the Silverdome, which is a football stadium, 80,000 seats, and they used to cordon off one corner of it and put removable stands on one side. And you could get 10,000 or you could get 40,000, depending on the game. I used to do some of the selling. Me and Isiah, we used to do commercials to try to have certain nights. So they'd have Punk Night, or they'd have Jim McMahon Night, or Toga Night, and stuff like that. God, I used to do commercials just to get people to come to the thing. I never got paid for my marketing skills. I probably should have, but that's kind of what you do. You want to get people interested. And, they were averaging like 2,000 people a game. So now when you get like 10,000, it seemed like a lot. Mm-hmm. But you still have to have a product on the floor. And we became exciting. I mean, you got a guy like Isiah who can handle the ball, and he struggled early in his career trying to become a point guard. What that consisted of, because he was so talented, he could score, but he had to learn how to, distribute the ball and get other people involved before he got his. And he really grew into that. And that's, why he became one of the best to ever play, because, he figured it out. For me, it was just kind of a continuation. I fought for a job, and I won the job as a rookie, and, was running the floor. That was my thing. I could score from outside. I could post up. I got to the foul line. I ran the fast break, and you had a guy like Isiah who was going to get you the ball. And, we had other good players. John Long was a real good player out of Detroit, and Kent Benson, great Indiana player. We traded for Bill Laimbeer down the line. We traded for Vinnie Johnson down the line. We drafted Joe Dumars. This is all happening. But that first year, it was just a matter of trying to win as much as possible. 2 young kids who never were used to losing nor wanted to lose, coming from Indiana and Notre Dame. We wanted to win. We weren't going to settle for just being Detroit, the same old Detroit, losing games. We didn't have that attitude. We said, we're going to win. So that really got the town interested. The city of Detroit started to get behind us, and we started winning some games, and you could see, some excitement building. And the fact that we both made the All-Star team as rookies.
It's incredible.
We both made, the all-rookie team, and a lot of exciting things were happening, and it was a great place to be at that time, and certainly things were starting to build, and I think they appreciated that they had 2 young stars or future stars and a couple older guys that I think were getting a taste that things could change here, and they were getting enthusiastic after going through a season like the one they had the year before where you're kind of down, you don't think it's going to happen. So, those older guys start to get excited, kind of feeds off of the younger guys. Hey, that's kind of where it all started. That's where Detroit became Detroit. 1981-82 season, I think people started to get excited.
Yeah, it was a massive increase from the season before in terms of performance, and two great young players starting to lead the team towards continued playoff success down the line. Now, just briefly, 1982 All-Star Game was actually in New Jersey, obviously not far from where you were born, as you were talking about before. How did you react to the news of being named to the East squad, and what do you recall about being involved in the game so close to where you actually grew up and were born?
No, that was as exciting as it gets, Adam. To ever think you were, one of the, 24 best players in the world at one time, and as a rookie, not only to make the team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't go in thinking that. I mean, it's an all-star game. That's for the best of the best. But I had played really well. I remember my first encounter with Dr. J. He was one of my heroes. I used to run home on Friday nights to watch the New York Nets of the old ABA on WOR television, Channel 9 here, and watch him play. Now, he went to the University of Massachusetts, where my one brother, Mark, who played football there, was there at the same time.
Oh, right.
So that was kind of ironic, because I remember he used to come home either for Christmas or after the football season or during school break or whatever, and try to tell us about at the University of Massachusetts has this really good basketball player. And we used to go like, what do you mean good? He'd say, no, he's like really good. And my other brothers would say the same thing and go, well, how good could he be? He goes to the University of Massachusetts. Not like, that's a powerhouse or whatever, a well-known college team.
Mm-hmm.
They go, no, he's really good. I'm telling you, he could probably be a pro. I go, well, what's his name? And he'd said, Julius Erving. And we used to go, never heard of him. And obviously Julius Erving became Dr. J. Man, Dr. J was so good in the ABA when he was with the Nets. It was scary. I used to love watching him play with the big afro and the red, white, and blue basketball. He was something else. When I was a kid watching him play, never, ever did I ever dream that I would be on the same floor as him. Obviously, my rookie year, you play everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the guys that I played against, during the course of my career, whether it's, Dr. J or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Bob Lanier or Tiny Archibald or Larry Bird or Charles Barkley or Michael Jordan. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I could give you 100 of them. You never put yourself in that category, but we had to play the Philadelphia 76ers, and they were darn good back in 1981-82. With Andrew Toney and Mo Cheeks and Moses Malone, and gosh, they were really good. And I'm like, I'm going to play against Dr. J? It's like, I'm scared, I'm intimidated, I'm excited, I'm everything. And I think the first game I played against Dr. J, I had like 30 points and like 8 assists and 6 rebounds, or 6 assists and 8 rebounds, whatever. I had big game. And, of course, everybody wanted to know after the game, all the reporters, what'd you think playing against Dr. J and putting up those kind of numbers? And, I'm stuttering and stammering, and I don't know what to say. I got a big smile on my face, and, I don't want to say the wrong thing or whatever. And I don't even remember what I said, but I do remember what Dr. J said, because they asked him, and word got back to me. And they asked him, what'd you think of the rookie, Kelly Tripucka and the game he had, and as classy as Julius is and always was, and I became very friendly with him. He said, hey, he says, number one, he's a pro. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here. Number two, seems like he's been putting up those type of numbers all season long, so you got to give him his credit. Something like it, if he continues to do that, he's going to be an all-star for many years or whatever. So, I mean, doesn't get any better than that, Adam. To have a guy like that who you idolized, respected, watched, and you end up playing a game against them and have an unbelievable night, and he gives you the respect that he showed. So I always thought of that and remembered that, and will never forget it. Respected what he said and how he's always acted. He's always been that way. So in the end, I wasn't too surprised, but it was a special night for me at that time, and playing against the great Julius Erving, and certainly I got a chance. It seemed like every night you were playing against somebody, so you didn't have time to get too awestruck because there was always another guy, waiting in the wings. When you look at the small forward position back in the 80s, I mean, gosh, every night there was somebody, whether it was Adrian Dantley, Dr. J, Larry Bird, Dominic Wilkins, Bernard King, Alex English, Kiki VanDeWeghe, Purvis Short. It just goes on and on and on. It seems like every night there's Bobby Jones. There's always somebody. It was never a night off. You either sink or swim, as they say. You had to compete. Otherwise, you'd get killed.
I love it. Thanks so much for sharing these memories as well. It's just awesome to hear you're reminiscing about this. So I really appreciate it. And the time that we've been chatting to date so far, just can't thank you enough. 1983, in January of 1983, you sprung for 56 points against the Bulls, and then you also broke Dave Bing's team record 54 points in that game. Do you remember much about the performance? There's a clip on YouTube which is titled Unforgettable Moments, Tripucka scores 56 or something like that, and it's a great little clip with some throwback to you in that game, scoring from all over the floor, a whole series of moves. Do you mind just talking us through that and what you thought of that particular performance?
Well, I mean, number one, I was sick.
You mentioned you had the flu the night before or something?
Yeah, I didn't play the night before, and that's unusual for me because I didn't like missing games. I had the flu, and we were playing Cleveland, who was not very good then. The theory was that, well, why don't you sit out this game because we got to play the next night or whatever it was against the Bulls, and we'll probably beat Cleveland, and we'll go from there. Well, guess what? We didn't beat Cleveland. So now that not making me happy. And then I felt worse the next day. I had like 103 temperature and just wasn't feeling great. I'm going to play because I'm mad that we lost and we got to try to win. So Coach Scotty Robertson at the time said, well, you just try to do whatever you can. I'll try to get you as much rest as possible, and you go from there. And, once you start warming up, you get a little adrenaline, and, you kind of get as much rest during the day, and you put it behind you, and see if you can go out. Again, I was, fairly young, and, I was going to try to do my best, and didn't like the losing, and certainly not the Cleveland at that time. So I got off to a hot start, just hit a couple of shots, and had it going for a little while early on, and there were a couple of timeouts, and I was sweating profusely, and then looking to sit down during those timeouts and catch my breath and hopefully try to get a second wind. And I remember Coach coming up, he's going, geez, I'd love to get you some time. He says, but you're going so good right now, I don't really want to take you out of the game. So by that time, you get off to a good start as a player, and you really don't want to come out. You ride the hot hand, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And, so then you say, no, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. Leave me in. I just got into a rhythm. Three-pointers, as I said before, were not very prevalent. So that was done without any three-pointers, hitting jump shots, getting in my range, foul line, wing, baseline, getting some post-ups, running the floor, got to the foul line. And after a while, again, you're trying to win the game. It was a close game against Chicago. I knew I was scoring well. You don't know how many at that time. But again, you're not really concerned about that because you're more looking at the scoreboard and trying to figure out how we get this win. So in the end, it was a close ball game towards the end. I know people were getting excited. I mean, to say I knew what they were excited about, I couldn't tell you, but at the same time, I knew something special was happening. So Isiah was trying to get me the ball as much as possible. And at the same time, we also want to win the game, but I'm the hot guy. And they put 4 or 5 different guys on me that night. Nothing could stop me. I think I ended up 18 for 25 or something. That's a really good percentage. I mean, it's not 40, 50 shots, 25 shots and you make 18. And I got to the line a lot. my main concern was winning the game, because if I was having a big game, which I knew I was, I don't like losing games that you have a big game. So I know he hit a shot towards the end, and then Vinnie Johnson hit a shot and then maybe a free throw, and we ended up winning that game by 1 or 2 or something like that. It was a real close ball game, and it was at the end. A couple of people came up to me on the court. They said, "You had 56." No kidding, 56? Yeah, and then they said, "You broke the scoring record of Dave Bing." Now, Dave Bing was a legend in Detroit. Still is. Was the mayor of Detroit at one time. And he broadcasted our games. So we saw Dave Bing a lot. What a gentleman, just a great guy. And my first thought was, for lack of a better word, I'm kind of embarrassed. This guy's a legend. I'm nobody. And, I felt kind of bad breaking his record in some way, but he was so classy about it. I think he told a story one time that doing the game, he was like saying, "They got to stop feeding Kelly because he's getting close to my record. I don't want him breaking it." So, Dave Bing is as nice a people as you'll ever meet. He's just a classy guy, was a great player. He congratulated me or whatever, but, that's how it goes. And more importantly, we won the game. That helped me get over my sickness a little bit. Sometimes you end up playing your best game when you don't expect to, because you're either sick or whatever. We saw Michael Jordan do it. That was pretty darn good. So I know the feeling. Sometimes you just get into a zone and you overcome those things because you don't have the expectations, and all of a sudden you get the adrenaline going and things are going right. It was my night. I was fortunate to have a few of those nights, and you just feel like you're not going to miss. And for me, most of the night I didn't miss, and we won the game, and I had 56. So it was a special thing. And you just think about it. You're an NBA player, and you scored 56 points against in the NBA. So it was pretty cool. It's something that you don't forget. You remember exactly kind of what happened. At the same time, you hope to have many more nights like that, but they're few and far between.
Yeah, it's a fantastic performance. Absolutely awesome. I'd just like to briefly quote from a great resource that I found online. It's from a book that's titled More Than 4 Decades of Motor City Memories by Steve Addy, and then it says updated by Jeffrey Carson. I'm not sure if it's even pronounced correct. It says, talking about the Pistons uniforms, the uniforms were again restyled in 82, switching to a clean block ladder concept that survived essentially untouched until 1996, except for the material, that is. The early 80s uniforms were a shiny grey, satin-like material that looked wonderful, as long as it stayed dry. But after the players got sweaty, the grey would turn a blotchy blue, changing to cotton eventually made amends for that fashion faux pas. So there's some classic photos throughout the 1980s, and particularly of those. I think that uniform style was celebrating the Pistons' 25th anniversary of moving from Fort Wayne. What do you recall about that particular uniform change at the time, Kelly?
Everybody loved the uniforms. They were actually pretty cool because it was celebrated 25 years, so it was silver. So, and the fact that we were in the Silver Dome, I don't think that had anything to do with it. But, the Lions, Detroit Lions, that played in the Silver Dome with us, or we played with them because it was really their home field. They were that silver and blue, and we were kind of, it's supposed to be red, white, and blue. But that one year, or at least a couple of years, we played in those silver uniforms, which are ever pretty cool. Like you said, they were like a satin material, so it's really different. They're actually very comfortable, but obviously when you did start to sweat, they would change it to a darker color. I wouldn't call it, they didn't change to blue. The gray just got dark gray, like when you sweat.
Yeah.
But the silver color was really kind of cool. If they could have ever done that in the cotton mesh or whatever that they have now, that would really be neat. Well, everybody used to always comment on those uniforms that one year with the silver before we went back to the white. They were just different at that time. So if the Pistons ever do a throwback, I don't know how they don't try to do that silver color.
Oh, yeah.
But now, obviously, in the material that they use, the light material, the mesh cotton, whatever, stretchy cotton that they use now, that would really be cool. That would be a great uniform because we love those uniforms. Those were pretty cool. Way ahead of their time.
I think there's a great photo of yourself after you had that. Pretty sure it's after your 56-point game. I think you still were wearing those uniforms at that time, perhaps, and there's a great photo of yourself celebrating just as you're walking off the court.
had the flu that game. So
That's right.
I was really sweating. So I guarantee it was a different color to start the game, Adam, than it was at the end of the game.
I'm absolutely certain of that. Thanks for listening. I welcome your interaction with the show. Suggest topics or guests you want to hear conversations with. You can leave me a voicemail. Just visit inallairness.com/voice. Click Start Recording, leave a message, and press Stop. You can even listen back before you submit. Press Send, and you're done. Time to share another excellent review from a fan of the show. Thanks to the incredibly named Art Chewington. That username is nothing to sneeze at. On the Australian iTunes store. Now, I actually happen to know this as Adam Wiseman. Thank you, Adam, for your great review on the podcast. It's titled Terrific, Insightful, and Extremely Punny. Nice play on words. And it reads, absolutely terrific podcast. Great in-depth analysis of Jordan's career on and even off the court with some great humour rolled in for good measure. If you're a fan of Jordan or even basketball history, give it a listen. You won't be disappointed. Now, thanks very much, Adam. That is a great review, and I really appreciate you taking time to send that review in. Worldwide, the show currently has 61 reviews. 58 are on iTunes and 3 on Stitcher. Thanks for your continued support. If you add a review, I'd love to read it out on a future episode. And as I always say, your ratings and reviews are one of the best ways that you can support the podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please do tell your basketball-loving friends about it. Your word-of-mouth recommendations are worth their weight in gold. You can subscribe to my show in various ways. inallairness.com/iTunes. Add it to your Stitcher playlist. inallairness.com/Stitcher. You can also subscribe on Pocket Casts, Overcast, Player FM, TuneIn Radio, other podcatchers, and of course via the Podcasts app on your iOS device of choice. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues. inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter at inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.